Okay, I'm back, and today we're going to talk about light and color. But before we start, let's do a little exercise. So close your eyes, or just visualize a red apple. See it, inspect it. Now turn the color green. Okay, I wanted to do that exercise to show you guys how much color impacts our everyday life. If you look around you, color adds almost another dimension to our lives, and I think sometimes we take it for granted. So we're going to talk about color and how light is intimately tied in with how we perceive color. Okay, so let's define some terms like usual. So what is light? Light is a wave. Okay, what do I mean by wave? Think of an ocean wave, right, that goes up and down. Light is not only a wave, but also a particle. We're going to talk about that in a second. But light is a wave of electromagnetic radiation. So sometimes energy comes in the form of a wave or particle. In this case, this energy is electromagnetic radiation. What does that mean? Throughout space, in reality, there exists an electromagnetic field, right? So there's electrons, there's charges that move through space, and they allow us to harness things like electricity. They contribute towards the magnetism of objects, things like that. So this is a form of energy that propagates, or it moves through. It moves through space. Space is in the area around us, the universe, all that stuff. Space and time. So what does it mean for something to move through time? Well, if something's going to move through time, it has to go from one time to another time. So let's think of it like this. Let's say I have a flashlight, and you're standing in front of me at a certain distance. And I shine my flashlight, and the light moves to you. HV is a little form for light. If I took a time at my position and your position from when I flashed the flashlight, you would find that your time is slightly different than my time. So we said that the light moves from one time to another time. So that's what happens if something moves through time. So this energy moves through space and time and can be perceived or seen by our eyes. In this case, we're talking about visible light. Why do I say that? Because light comes in all sorts of forms. It comes in UV rays, X-rays, infrared radiation, AM and FM radio waves, and microwaves, just like the microwaves we use in our day-to-day lives. So in order to understand light a little bit more, we have to understand what it's made of. So let's go to number 2 here. We've talked about visible light and some of the forms of light, but a light is made of these things called photons, these very tiny particles, or these tiny units of matter that are the fundamental units of electromagnetic radiation. They are the stuff that this electromagnetic energy is made of. The thing about photons is that they have what I like to call an identity crisis. These particles exist as particles and waves. I guess these forms of energy exist as particles and waves at the same time. It's called the wave-particle duality. So the particles behave like waves, and the waves behave like particles. That might sound very confusing, and it's very confusing to me too, but that's what it is. So think of if you have a pet, and your pet existed as a cat and a dog at the same time. You would perceive your pet to be one or the other depending on how you looked at it. That's essentially how this stuff works. It's really weird. I'm not a physicist, but that's just how it is. Think of the ocean waves. Like I said before, the waves go up and they crash down, and they go up and they crash down. I mentioned before that energy can come in that form, in the form of a wave. So in this section, we're going to talk about light as a wave. So why is this important? Let's go to number 1. Electromagnetic radiation is distinguished, this energy that moves through space is distinguished by wavelength and frequency. So what does that mean? So we understand electromagnetic radiation as a form of energy, but what is wavelength? Wavelength literally means the distance between one top of a wave, or one hilltop of a wave, and another hilltop of a wave. That's wavelength. Now it's also distinguished by frequency. So what is frequency? Frequency means how many hilltops are present in a wave. So this one has 3, and this one has more frequency than this one. This one has 2. So that's what we mean by wavelength and frequency. Well, again, why is that important? It's important because number 2 here, visible light, the portion that we can see, is determined by wavelength and frequency. For example, the color red is between 620 nanometers. A nanometer is a very small unit of measurement, like a centimeter or a millimeter. It's just a lot smaller. So the color red is between 620 nanometers and 750 nanometers. So if you have a wave that has wavelengths in between this, it's perceived as the color red. And that applies to all colors in the visible spectrum and the energies that we can't see. X-rays. Oh, and gamma ray is another one I missed. That's another form of energy. So let's switch it up a little bit. Take a look at this drawing. Some of you might have seen this drawing. It's an MC Escher drawing. The more you look at it, the less it makes sense. It's because this is an optical illusion. For the rest of this video, we're going to answer a question. And the question is color an illusion? Now that might be a confusing question, but it's a legitimate one. So let's answer it and talk about why I'm asking this question and why this question is important. So to answer the question, as number 1 says, color does not exist. It's an illusion. Now you might be thinking to yourself, what do you mean? The color of that apple I have is clearly red. The wood I see is clearly brown. Well, what I mean is that color is about how we perceive light. It's about the perception of light. So let's go to number 2 here. Just a reminder, white light is made up of all the colors of the color spectrum. And that's going to be an important fact as we move on in this video. So let's talk about why color is an illusion. So let's say you have that red apple. Well, what happens is that the photons from the sun or any source of light hit that apple. And for some reason, we perceive the color as red. Well, why do we perceive it as red? Well, it turns out red apples in their skin have this stuff called anthocyanin, this family of molecules. Now, why is anthocyanin important? So let's go to number 2. Here's what happens when white light hits anthocyanin. Something interesting occurs. Anthocyanin absorbs blue light, green light, yellow light, purple light, and orange light, but it does not absorb red. So what happens is red is reflected back at our eyes. That's the only reason why this apple has color. That's the only reason why anything has color. It's about the way the photons hit the object and then bounce off the object into your eye. Let's get a little bit deeper and talk about what happens when it does hit our eye. The human eyes are some of the most fascinating organs that we have. They make our lives so much more rich just by seeing color and having vision. So when that light hits our eyes, it goes through the pupil, through the lens, and then it hits our retina. So some of us have heard about the retina, but what is it? The retina is a group of tissue on the back of the eye. And in the retina, you have these interesting things, let's go to number 2, called photoreceptors. Now, what does this mean? Photo, image, seen, receptors. So these neurons, these nervous system cells, receive information, images, scenes, and this is how we process color. So we have a set of cells called rods. These process grayscale, gray, black, things like that. But then we have a set of cells called cones. Let me change the color real quick. These cones process color. I like to say cone color. So what happens when the light hits these cones, these red, green, and blue cones, they get excited. And when they get excited, they send an electrical impulse down the nerves through what's called the optic nerve, the eye nerve. And this goes into the brain and it's processed as color. And this is how we see in general. This is how we have vision. The optic nerve receives all this stimulation and we process the world around us. And it's also important to know that the human eye can detect over 1 million colors and color variations. It's truly a magic organ, a magic sense organ. So I know this video was a little complex, so let's go through the summary just to review all the stuff we talked about. So we first spoke about how light was a form of energy that moves through space and time and is made up of these tiny particles called photons. And these particles are the stuff that this energy, this radiation is made of. But at the same time, these photons behave oddly. They behave like particles and waves at the same time. Their existence is a probability. And then we spoke about light as a wave, how this energy is distinguished by wavelength, the difference between these mountaintops, the distance, and frequency, how many mountaintops there are in a given wave. And visible light is all dependent upon the wavelength and the frequency. We gave the example of the color red. And then we spoke briefly about how color is an illusion. It's about the perception of light. And then we got a little deeper and talked about that red apple. The photons hit that red apple, and this molecule anthocyanin absorbs blue, green, yellow, purple, orange, reflects red, so we see the color red. And then we talked about the eyes, how when that light moves through the eye, it hits the retina, and then these photoreceptors, these cones and rods, process this information. And in this case, for an object that has a color, these cones, these red, green, and blue cones, get excited. They send an impulse down the optic nerve, the eye nerve, and our brains process it as color. So that's all I got for this video. Take the time to walk outside, to look around you, to see the incredible colors and color variations that you might take for granted every single day. Color truly does add an incredible spice to our day-to-day lives. So thank you so much for watching and listening. Please like, comment, and subscribe. Tell your friends, and I'll be back soon with another video.